Sergeant Daniel Grayson had been on the force for nearly a decade, known for his calm demeanor and unbreakable spirit. He had faced countless dangerous situations, but this night was different. Responding to a robbery at a remote warehouse, he found himself caught in an ambush. Shots rang out in the dark. Daniel's body hit the ground, a sharp pain spreading through his abdomen as his vision blurred. His radio sputtered in static. No help was coming in time. Alone and bleeding out, he struggled to stay conscious. Then, out of the shadows, came a figure with sharp ears and an alert gaze. A German shepherd named Max. Max had not always been a police dog. In fact, life had hardened him in ways many could not imagine. Once he had a home, a warm, caring family. But that was before the accident that took his previous owner's life. Since then, Max had passed through various shelters, each time growing more wary of humans. Trust had become a distant memory. Even in his role as a K-9 recruit, he often distanced himself from others, especially those who tried to get too close. The night Daniel was shot, Max had been nearby on a routine patrol with another officer. When Max heard the gunfire, instincts overtook training. He broke free from his handler and ran toward the source of the noise. What he found was a man, wounded, breathing shallowly, and surrounded by danger. Max hesitated, his mind racing with doubts. Could he trust this man? What if it was another trap? But something deep inside, an old, buried sense of loyalty, drove him forward. Carefully, he nudged Daniel, who stirred and whispered weakly, "Good boy, help." Summoning every ounce of courage, Max did what he had been trained for. He latched onto Daniel's belt and began dragging him away from the open ground, toward cover behind a stack of crates. Each movement was slow and agonizing for both of them. Max's heart pounded, not from physical exertion but from fear of failure, fear that the man he was trying to save would not survive. Finally, sirens echoed in the distance. Backup had arrived. Officers swarmed the scene, securing the area and rushing to Daniel's side. Max stood frozen, watching as paramedics stabilized the wounded officer. One of the officers tried to approach Max to calm him, but the dog backed away, growling softly, a defense mechanism born from years of mistrust. "Easy, Max," the handler said gently. "You did good." But Max wasn't ready to accept praise or comfort. He had done his duty and now wanted nothing more than to vanish into the background. Yet fate had other plans. Daniel awoke days later in a hospital bed. The first face he saw was that of his captain, who explained how Max had saved his life. Despite the trauma of his injuries, Daniel's thoughts were drawn to the dog. He owed his life to that shepherd. "Where's Max?" Daniel asked, his voice hoarse. "He's back at the precinct," the captain replied. "But you should know Max isn't exactly the trusting type. He's been through a lot." The words lingered in Daniel's mind. He understood what it meant to carry invisible wounds, and something in him knew he had to see Max again. It wasn't just gratitude, he felt a connection, as though both of them had been given a second chance that night. Back at the precinct, Max paced anxiously in his kennel. Despite his heroic actions, he couldn't shake the weight of his past. He had learned to survive by keeping his distance, by never letting anyone get too close. And yet, images of the man he had saved haunted him. There had been something different in Daniel's eyes, pain, yes, but also trust. Max wasn't used to being trusted. When Daniel finally visited, he moved slowly and carefully, respecting the boundaries Max had erected around himself. "Hey there, buddy," Daniel said softly, crouching to meet Max's eye level. He didn't reach out, didn't force the dog to interact. Instead, he simply sat near the kennel, allowing Max to observe him. Max tilted his head, ears twitching. For the first time in a long while, he didn't feel an immediate urge to retreat. There was no aggression in Daniel's posture, no demand for trust. It was different. Max let out a cautious whine, stepping closer to the bars of the kennel. "You saved my life," Daniel continued, "and I want to help you now. No rush, okay? We'll figure this out together." Max didn't fully understand the words, but he sensed their sincerity. For the first time in what felt like years, a small crack appeared in the walls around his heart. It was the beginning of something neither of them could have predicted. Their journey toward trust and healing had begun, though both knew it wouldn't be easy. Daniel faced a long recovery from his wounds, while Max wrestled with fears that had kept him isolated for so long. Yet in that quiet moment, there was a shared understanding. They had both been broken by life, but together, they might find a way to heal. Little did they know greater challenges and dangers lay ahead. But for now, they had each other, and sometimes that was enough to spark hope. Daniel's recovery was grueling. Every day brought new challenges. Physical therapy sessions that left him exhausted, moments of doubt where he wondered if he would ever regain his strength. Yet through it all, his thoughts often drifted to Max. There was something comforting about the dog's presence in his life now. Maybe it was because they had both faced death that night and come out the other side scarred but alive. A week after leaving the hospital, Daniel visited the K9 training center again. This time, he was cleared to take Max home temporarily, a trial arrangement that would allow the dog to adjust to a calmer environment. Daniel knew Max wouldn't trust easily, and frankly, Daniel wasn't sure how to bond with a dog who had been through so much, but he was determined to try. The first few days were tense. Max roamed Daniel's small house nervously, nose twitching as he inspected every corner. He was hypervigilant, reacting to every sound. The creak of the floorboards, a car passing outside, even the hum of the refrigerator. Daniel didn't push him. He let Max explore on his own terms. The dog refused to settle, spending most of his time pacing near the front door or lying stiffly in the corner of the living room, his ears always on alert. He barely ate, and Daniel noticed that Max rarely slept for more than a few minutes at a time. The nightmares, if dogs could have them, seemed to haunt him as much as they did Daniel. They were two restless souls trying to find peace in each other's presence. One evening, Daniel decided to take a different approach. Instead of trying to engage Max directly, he quietly sat on the floor near the dog, keeping his posture relaxed and unthreatening. He grabbed a book and began reading aloud in a calm, soothing voice. Max glanced at him warily but didn't move away. Minutes turned into an hour. Slowly, the tension in Max's body eased. He stopped pacing and eventually lay down, his head resting on his paws. It wasn't much, but it was progress. "That's it, buddy," Daniel murmured softly. "We're both learning how to do this." Small victories began to accumulate over the following days. Max finally ate a full meal without hesitation. He started following Daniel around the house, not too closely, but enough to show curiosity. One afternoon, Max even allowed Daniel to gently scratch behind his ears. It was the first time the dog had willingly sought out affection since arriving. But just as things seemed to be improving, the shadows of the past resurfaced. It happened during an early morning walk. The neighborhood was quiet, the sky painted in soft hues of dawn. Max walked beside Daniel, his leash loose and tail swaying slightly, a sign that he was beginning to relax. They rounded a corner when, suddenly, a loud bang shattered the peaceful moment. Car backfired down the street. Max froze, his ears flattening and eyes widening in panic. In a flash, he lunged, trying to bolt in the opposite direction. Daniel tightened his grip on the leash, but he didn't yank or shout. Instead, he crouched low, speaking in a steady, reassuring tone. "Easy, Max. It's okay. You're safe. I've got you." Max's breathing was rapid and shallow. His body trembled as he looked around, expecting danger. Memories of gunshots and violence flooded his mind. For a few agonizing moments, Daniel thought he might lose the fragile trust they had built. But then something shifted. Slowly, Max's frantic gaze found Daniel's calm, steady eyes. The man wasn't panicking. He wasn't angry. He was simply there, grounded, present, and patient. Max whimpered softly but didn't pull away. He inched closer to Daniel, pressing his body against the man's side. It was a gesture of vulnerability and trust, a sign that he was willing to let someone protect him for once. "There you go," Daniel whispered, gently stroking Max's back. "We'll get through this together." They stayed like that for several minutes until Max's breathing steadied. The noise had long faded, but the emotional storm it had triggered took time to settle. When they finally resumed their walk, Max remained close to Daniel's side, no longer pulling on the leash. Later that evening, Daniel reflected on the incident. He realized that both he and Max were still haunted by their past traumas. The car backfiring had been a stark reminder of how fragile progress could be. Yet, it had also shown them both something important. They didn't have to face their fears alone. Max seemed different after that day. He still had moments of anxiety, but he began seeking out Daniel's presence more frequently. He would rest his head on Daniel's lap while they watched TV or quietly lie at his feet while Daniel worked on reports. Trust was growing slowly, but steadily. One night, Daniel awoke from a nightmare, his body drenched in sweat and his heart racing. He sat up, disoriented and gasping for breath. Before he could fully gather his thoughts, he felt a warm weight press against his side. Max had jumped onto the bed, his amber eyes filled with quiet concern. "Hey, buddy," Daniel murmured, his voice shaky. He reached out to stroke Max's fur, grounding himself in the present. The dog leaned into the touch, offering silent comfort. In that moment, Daniel realized how much they had come to rely on each other. Max wasn't just a dog anymore, he was a partner, a guardian in his own right. And maybe, just maybe, they were both starting to heal. As the days passed, both man and dog continued to take small but meaningful steps forward. However, an unseen threat loomed on the horizon, one that would test their newfound bond in ways they couldn't yet imagine. The storm was coming, but this time they wouldn't face it alone. Life settled into a cautious rhythm for Daniel and Max. The bond between them grew stronger each day, and Max became more comfortable in his new home. He even began showing playful moments, chasing a ball in the backyard, wagging his tail when Daniel came home from therapy, and greeting neighbors during their walks. But underneath the surface, both man and dog knew that healing was not a straight path. The past still lingered like a distant storm cloud, waiting to be stirred. One afternoon, Daniel received a call from his captain. The gang responsible for the ambush that nearly killed him had resurfaced. They had been laying low, but intelligence suggested they were planning something big. Daniel felt his pulse quicken as he listened to the details. This wasn't just a police matter anymore, it was personal. Later that evening, Daniel sat on the porch with Max by his side. The sun was setting, casting a warm, golden light over the neighborhood. Daniel absent-mindedly stroked Max's head, his mind racing with thoughts of the case. "You sense it too, don't you?" he murmured. Max's ears twitched, and he let out a soft huff. The dog had grown increasingly alert over the past few days, as though sensing the tension that weighed on Daniel. His instincts, honed by both training and experience, told him that danger was approaching. A few nights later, that danger arrived. It was well past midnight when Max's ears perked up at a faint sound, a low rustling near the back fence. He rose quietly from his bed and padded to the window. His eyes narrowed as he caught movement in the shadows. Someone was outside. Max barked sharply, waking Daniel from a light sleep. The officer grabbed his firearm from the nightstand and moved cautiously to the window. He saw what Max had noticed: two figures near the back of the property, dressed in dark clothing and attempting to scale the fence. "Stay here," Daniel whispered, though he knew Max wouldn't listen. Max followed closely as Daniel moved through the house, his muscles coiled like a spring. Daniel unlocked the back door and stepped outside, his weapon raised. "Police! Freeze!" he shouted. The intruders panicked, scrambling to climb back over the fence. One of them pulled out a weapon and fired blindly in Daniel's direction. The shot echoed through the night, and Max reacted without hesitation. He lunged forward, knocking Daniel to the ground just as the bullet whizzed past where he had been standing. Daniel quickly regained his footing and returned fire, forcing the attackers to retreat. Sirens blared in the distance. Daniel had managed to trigger the house's silent alarm during the commotion. Within minutes, backup arrived, and the area was secured. As officers swept the scene, Daniel knelt beside Max, checking him for injuries. The dog's breathing was heavy, but he appeared unharmed. "You saved me again, buddy," Daniel said softly, his voice filled with gratitude. Max licked his hand, his eyes reflecting both relief and determination. The following days were tense. The attack confirmed that the gang was targeting Daniel, likely seeking revenge for the night he had survived their ambush. Security around his home was tightened, but Daniel couldn't shake the feeling that the fight was far from over. Max, too, remained on high alert. He rarely left Daniel's side, constantly scanning his surroundings for threats. Yet, despite the tension, their bond deepened further. Max began to trust not just Daniel but the other officers who visited the house. He allowed himself to relax in their presence, even accepting treats and scratches from those he had once viewed with suspicion. Then came the breaking point. A week after the attack, Daniel received a tip about the gang's hideout. The police organized a raid, and Daniel was asked to stay on the sidelines due to his recovery. But as the operation unfolded, things quickly went wrong. A standoff ensued, with hostages taken inside a decrepit warehouse. Daniel knew he couldn't just stand by. He geared up and brought Max with him, knowing that the dog's skills could be crucial in resolving the situation. They arrived at the scene to find chaos, officers exchanging fire with the gang members barricaded inside. "Max, we need to end this," Daniel whispered, kneeling beside the dog. Max's ears perked up, his eyes sharp and focused. This was what he had been trained for. Together, they moved through a side entrance, avoiding the main conflict. Max led the way, his nose guiding them toward the hostages. They found them in a back room, tied up but unharmed. Daniel worked quickly to free them while Max stood guard. But just as they were about to escape, a gang member appeared in the doorway, gun raised. Time seemed to slow. Daniel couldn't reach his weapon in time.
Max reacted instinctively.
With a fierce growl, he lunged at the attacker, knocking the weapon from his hand. The man struggled, but Max held firm, his jaws clamped on the assailant's arm. Daniel took the opportunity to subdue the man and secure the scene. "Good boy," Daniel whispered, patting Max's side. "You did it." Backup soon arrived to escort the hostages to safety. The raid ended successfully, with most of the gang members apprehended. The threat that had haunted Daniel for so long was finally over. That night, back at home, Daniel and Max sat quietly on the porch. The stars shone brightly overhead, a peaceful contrast to the chaos they had faced. "We've been through hell and back, huh?" Daniel said, scratching Max behind the ears. The dog leaned into the touch, his body fully relaxed for the first time in weeks. In that moment, both man and dog understood something profound. They had faced their fears, their pasts, and the darkness that had tried to consume them. Together, they had emerged stronger, bound by an unbreakable trust. Max let out a content sigh and rested his head on Daniel's lap. For the first time in a long while, both of them felt truly safe. The storm had passed, leaving behind a sense of peace and hope, one they had earned through compassion, courage, and sheer willpower. In the days following the successful raid, Daniel and Max finally found themselves at a crossroads where the weight of survival could be traded for something lighter, healing. The danger had passed, and life slowly resumed a sense of normalcy, though scars, both seen and unseen, remained. For Daniel, the memory of those terrifying nights still echoed in his dreams. But now, when he awoke in the middle of the night, drenched in sweat, Max was always there to offer silent reassurance. The department recognized Max's heroism. He was formally honored at a small ceremony where officers gathered to celebrate his bravery. Daniel stood proudly beside his partner, a hand resting gently on Max's head as the captain spoke. "This dog is a true hero," the captain said. "He saved Sergeant Grayson's life not once, but twice. Max exemplifies the loyalty and courage we strive for in this line of duty. Today, we honor him as one of our own." The room erupted in applause, but Max remained calm, his eyes flicking up to Daniel as if to say, "Are we done yet?" Daniel chuckled softly and whispered, "You're the star today, buddy. Get used to it." Despite the recognition, Max was still adjusting to his new life. Crowds made him uneasy, and the loud applause during the ceremony caused him to flinch slightly. Daniel noticed and quickly guided him outside for a break, giving him time to decompress. "Let's take this one step at a time," Daniel said, crouching down to meet Max's gaze. "No one's rushing you." Max leaned into him slightly, a gesture of trust that had become more frequent. Each day was a small victory in their journey toward peace. At home, things continued to improve. Max became more confident, exploring the backyard with curiosity instead of caution. He started chasing birds and even digging small holes in the garden, much to Daniel's amused annoyance. "You're really settling in, huh?" Daniel joked as he filled in another hole. Max wagged his tail and barked playfully, almost as if teasing Daniel. It wasn't just Max who was healing. Daniel began to feel lighter, too. His physical therapy sessions became more manageable, and he found himself smiling more often. The nightmares still came, but they were less intense. When he needed comfort, Max was there, grounding him with quiet presence. One evening, Daniel received a visit from Officer Hernandez, Max's former handler. She had always cared deeply for the dog, but Max had struggled to connect with anyone after the trauma of his previous life. "Hey, Max," Hernandez said softly, kneeling to greet him. To her surprise, Max didn't back away. He sniffed her hand cautiously and allowed her to scratch behind his ears. "Wow," she said, smiling up at Daniel. "He's come a long way." "Yeah, he has," Daniel replied, pride evident in his voice. "We both have." Hernandez nodded. "I'm glad he found you. I think you were exactly what he needed. Funny thing is, I think I needed him just as much." Despite the progress, there was still one final hurdle, the place where it all began. Daniel knew he needed closure, and he sensed that Max did too. Together, they visited the warehouse where the ambush had nearly taken Daniel's life. The building was now abandoned, its windows shattered and graffiti covering the walls. The memories of that night came rushing back: gunfire, pain, and the overwhelming sense of helplessness. Max walked beside Daniel, his ears twitching nervously as they entered the darkened space. His paws made soft echoes on the concrete floor. Daniel knelt and gently stroked Max's head, grounding both of them in the present. "This place doesn't own us," Daniel said quietly. "We survived. We beat the odds." Max looked up at him, his amber eyes calm but watchful. It was as if he understood. Together, they stood in the place that had almost claimed their lives. But now it was just a memory, no longer a threat. They left the warehouse behind, walking side by side into the light of a new day. It was symbolic in many ways. They had faced their fears head-on and emerged stronger. The past no longer held power over them. Life continued to improve for both of them. Max became a familiar presence at the police station, greeting officers with a wagging tail and a confident stride. He had finally found a sense of belonging, not just as a K-9 officer, but as part of a family. Daniel, too, found renewed purpose in his work. He took on a mentorship role, helping younger officers learn to navigate the challenges of the job. His experiences gave him a unique perspective, and his story of survival inspired others. The bond between man and dog grew deeper with each passing day. They became inseparable partners, each providing strength and comfort to the other. Together, they faced whatever life threw at them with resilience and hope. One day, while sitting on the porch, Daniel looked down at Max and smiled. "We've been through a lot, haven't we?" Max tilted his head and barked softly, as if in agreement. "Yeah," Daniel continued, "but we're still here, and I wouldn't have it any other way." The sun dipped below the horizon, casting a warm, golden glow over the neighborhood. For the first time in what felt like forever, Daniel felt at peace. He knew the road ahead wouldn't always be easy, but he also knew they would face it together. Man and dog, partners, survivors, friends. Months passed, and the seasons began to shift. The cold grip of winter gradually softened into the warmth of spring. Life around Daniel and Max seemed brighter, more vibrant. They had come a long way from the darkness that had nearly consumed them, and now every day felt like a step forward. a testament to their resilience and growing bond. Daniel's house had become a true home, filled with laughter and life again. Max had fully embraced his role not just as a protector but as a companion. His eyes, once haunted by fear and distrust, now gleamed with happiness. He greeted each new day with enthusiasm, his tail wagging at the slightest hint of adventure. Daniel, too, had found a new sense of purpose. His recovery was almost complete. He returned to active duty, but with a different mindset, one focused on balance and compassion. Max was now his official partner, accompanying him on patrols and investigations. Together, they became a well-known duo, respected by their fellow officers and admired by the community. One warm evening, Daniel and Max were invited to a community event at a local park. Families gathered for a barbecue, children played on the grass, and music floated through the air. It was a celebration of safety and resilience, organized to honor the officers who had helped dismantle the gang that had once terrorized the area. As Daniel mingled with the crowd, Max found himself surrounded by a group of children. They giggled and clapped as he performed simple tricks, sitting, rolling over, and shaking hands. For a dog who had once shied away from people, this moment was a triumph. He basked in the attention, his tail wagging furiously. A little girl with curly hair approached cautiously, holding out a small piece of a hot dog. "Can he have this?" she asked Daniel. "Sure," Daniel replied with a smile. "Just hold your hand flat." Max gently took the treat from the girl's hand, his movements calm and deliberate. The girl beamed and gave him a hug around his neck. Max tensed for a moment, caught off guard by the sudden affection, but then he relaxed, leaning into the embrace. Daniel watched the scene unfold with a mixture of pride and gratitude. Seeing Max like this, a dog who had once carried so much pain, filled his heart with warmth. They had both come so far, and moments like this reminded Daniel that the journey had been worth it. Later that night, Daniel and Max returned home, exhausted but content. Daniel prepared a light dinner while Max sprawled out on his favorite spot near the couch. The quiet hum of the evening settled over them, a comforting reminder that the chaos of their past was finally behind them. As they ate, Daniel reflected on everything they had endured. The ambush that had nearly killed him, the fear and trauma that had shaped Max's mistrust, and the countless battles, physical and emotional, they had fought together. But those experiences had forged something unbreakable between them. Daniel knelt beside Max and scratched his ears. "You know, buddy, I don't think I would have made it without you." Max tilted his head, as if trying to understand. He licked Daniel's hand in response, a silent but powerful gesture of loyalty. "You're more than just a dog," Daniel continued softly. "You're my partner, my family, and I promise, I'll always be here for you, just like you were there for me." Max let out a content sigh and rested his head on Daniel's knee. For both of them, it was a moment of peace, a culmination of all the pain, growth, and triumph they had experienced. They were no longer defined by their pasts. They had carved out a new path together, one built on trust, love, and hope. Time continued to move forward, but the bond between Daniel and Max remained unshakable. They faced new challenges, new cases, and new adventures, but they did so as a team. The community came to know them not just as heroes, but as a symbol of resilience, the man and his loyal German shepherd who had defied the odds and found healing in each other. On quiet evenings, when the world outside slowed down, Daniel and Max would sit together on the porch, watching the stars. No words were needed in those moments. Their shared experiences spoke louder than any conversation ever could. In the end, it wasn't just a story about survival. It was a story of transformation. How two souls, battered by life's trials, found strength and healing in the most unlikely of places. Together, they had faced the darkness and emerged into the light. Man and dog, partners, survivors, family. And for them, this was only the beginning of a new, hopeful chapter.